Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jeremy, founder of QuickMail.io.
Hey, and this is Jack from emailsthatsell.com.
In this episode, we're going to introduce you to one of the coolest developments in call outreach, multi-part campaigns. You're not going to find many articles on this subject because up until now, they've been very hard to pull off. But today, technology makes it possible to take advantage of these campaigns, even if you have limited resources to dedicate to cold email. We hope this cast will help you familiarize with the concept as well as give you ideas for your own cold email outreach efforts. You'll learn what multiple campaigns are, why they are so effective, and also we'll throw a few real-life examples that you can follow. Today we're going to talk about multi-part campaigns.
Is it multi-part or multi-step?
Well, let's find out.
Okay, cool. Here we go. All right, Jeremy. So multi-step campaigns, what is it?
Great question. I think it's the ability to take a prospect through multiple campaigns. So traditionally, when we're doing outreach, we have our campaign set up, which is I'm sending the first email, I'm waiting a little bit of time. If that person doesn't reply, I'm sending the first follow-up. If that person doesn't reply, I'm sending a second follow-up. You got the picture. But at some point in the journey, they may reply, maybe on step 2, maybe on first step, maybe on last step, doesn't matter. And then from that reply, we may want to take them into a second campaign. A good example for that would be like, hey, would you be interested in my services I have to offer, maybe SEO, whatever. And then they say, yeah, sure, send me some pricing or send me a quote. Then the next campaign will then kick off and send them, here is a price list. But usually people stop there. But the advantage of having a multiple step campaign is that the second campaign will also have the follow-up and make sure that this person replies.
So basically, you're splitting the end game of your cold email into 2 different steps here. Step 1, you're going for a certain response that's different than what you're actually trying to achieve. Once you get that reply, then part 2 begins where you go for a deeper commitment.
You take your outreach and you actually cut it into a funnel. So no more is it like outreach is the top of my funnel, then I go into sales conversation. Now your funnel itself is actually split into multiple parts before it can start a sales conversation.
Okay. So if you're listening, you might be wondering like, okay, guys, sounds a little confusing. Why would I want to break my campaign down into multiple steps? And the answer is you can improve your response rates if you ask for a smaller commitment and build on that as opposed to going straight in for the kill. For example, if you've got a campaign running and you're trying to book some sales calls, but maybe you're saying, when my call to action is, hey, will you join me for a 15-minute call? You're very unhappy with your response rates. Maybe there's a step before the call that you can ask in part 1, get a reply, and then move on to part 2, which gets the scheduled call. But here's what's going on that's a little bit different than normal, because this sounds like just following up to a response in a cold email campaign. But in reality, the difference is these are automated follow-ups. So you're doing much less work, but letting the email campaign drive the sales conversation forward.
Yeah, that's right. There's another advantage as well is imagine then you're not getting so much replies and you decide, okay, instead of going straight for the kill, I'm going to ask for a little ask first, then I will get the person starting getting committed to having conversation with you. And then you can take them for bigger and bigger ask. So if I didn't do that, I will have the end game straight away. I know if they reply to me or not, but I wouldn't necessarily know at what stage did they stop to follow me in their thought process. Where if I actually send small things first, like, is it a problem you're interested in discussing? Or have you experienced something like that in your company? Or would you be interested in some documents laying out some information about X? Then you will get more information about maybe where am I really getting a no? Is it because they don't experience this problem right now? So you may want to do multi-part step campaign in order to figure out on what ground exactly am I getting rejected? What are the objections here? So if you want to do a little bit more discovery, rather than asking straight away for the end game, you will actually split it into multiple lower ask questions to figure out, am I getting more reply to explain me what are the objections or what are the concerns here?
Right. You can see, if you think about it like a funnel of a website, you can see what page your visitors are dropping off, so to speak. Okay. So what's going on here? Why does it work when you ask for something easier and then slowly build up? It's the commitment and consistency principle that we've discussed before. It's also one of the things we use to our advantage to get the interviews in episode 100.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so psychologists have this thing called the foot in the door principle, and it says exactly that. It's easier to get someone to agree to a big commitment if first you can get them to say yes to something small.
And on top of that, there is also an advantage in terms of the process, because right now, if you think about it, when someone reply, it could be, for example, that they're replying like, yes, send me your price list and so on, but they're not quite at a stage where they're ready to have the sales conversation. And you could have your VA handling different type of responses to your first smaller part campaign that will then triage them into the right next campaign to take. So if they reply to the next campaign, then it's okay to either start another campaign or go and have a full, sales conversation. So you don't waste the time of your salespeople when you got a bigger team.
Yeah. So a couple examples here. Let's say I'm sending an email out to generate some leads and I get the response back saying, hey, this really isn't in my department, but you are more than welcome to reach out to Amy. If that's the case and you find that you're getting several of these quote unquote referral emails, you can bring that new conversation into part 2, which sounds something like, hey, Amy, got your name and information from so-and-so, wanted to find out if this was something you'd want to consider. Now, the cool thing is this is completely automated because you're just moving one prospect from one campaign to the next as the sales process gets closer and closer to that moment where you take credit card payment. The software is handling more of the legwork in these multi-step campaigns.
That's right. And you don't need necessarily a salesperson to actually be able to figure out if someone replied to you, it's not my domain, it's Amy that is looking into that. You don't need a salesperson to actually, do the follow-up on that. It could be like your VA looks at this. It's like, oh, okay, there's this one. I'm following up to this part campaign, maybe edit a few things and then done. And then the follow-up will happen to Amy as well, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. And that way, when a lead is finally ready to be handed off to a salesperson, they're much deeper into the conversation. Let's say they've already agreed to a 15-minute call and you already have some key pieces of information. Another example beyond sort of categorizing and handling different replies with ease, let's say you're a consultant trying to get more consulting hours booked. You could create a single part campaign where you just email prospects and say, would you like to pay for an hour consultation? But a much more elegant way to get the exact same end result, which is the consultations booked, you could first reach out in part 1 saying, hey, since you're in the service industry, would you mind if I sent over a report that my company just put together that may help you achieve XYZ? That's a much easier to say yes to. It's also a chance for your prospect to get wowed by your work. It's the first time that they can really say, okay, this person really knows their stuff.
Yeah, or it could simply be, I'm not the right person to talk to.
Yeah, and all of this is helpful. But let's say they do say, sure, go ahead and send me the white paper. Well, at that point, your VA, all they have to do is move that lead into the send white paper campaign. And that will kick off a series of emails that say something like, hey, thanks for requesting the white paper. Here it is. You can download it XYZ. 2 days later, there's a follow-up message that's saying, does it make sense to talk, etc. The sales cycle continues without you spending a whole lot of time nurturing each and every lead.
Yeah, and by the way, guys, actually don't do that. Actually just say like, hey, here's the white paper. When do you want to discuss it? So you actually just try to book them like a time to actually go through the white paper. Or you can send like, here's the summary and I got a full-blown version. Maybe we can talk about it a bit more in details. I only need like 15 minutes to present you what information is relevant to you. Something like that. Anyway, that's just sales.
Sure.
We're moving away. But another example I wanted to give you about a 2-part campaign is very often when people are doing mouse and whisker, I think it's episode 92, this is the idea of disguising yourself as a potential client. So in essence, not really revealing your full identity, and could be being both, right?
Sort of gray hat.
Yeah, it's a gray hat tactic. So I used that a long time ago on financial planners. And my go-to question was, hey, do you do transition to retirement? Yes or no kind of thing. And of course, this is like a very technical term. Some do, some don't. But as soon as they do, they send you all those documents about like, yes, we do, and then they send you all the information, the PDF and stuff like that. And then manually what I was doing at that stage is trying to flip the conversation and say, oh, great, that's fantastic, because my product only serves, people doing transition to retirement. So it was kind of like a sneaky way of doing at it. It's very difficult. It's time consuming and the rate of success is very low. But if you have a multi-part step campaign, then it is something you can do almost on autopilot without having to think about it, and still gain some leads from your market research doing mouse and whisker. That's another example of a good usage of a multi-step campaign.
So a couple of benefits here. If you're still wondering if you should bother setting up these multi-part campaigns, 2 benefits right off the top. It's going to save you a lot of time handling replies. You can build out parts 2 and 3, 4 that can take specific types of replies and automatically move them down your sales funnel. And number 2, it's going to improve your response rates. Not only that, but your positive response rates, because you're using this foot in the door principle to your advantage. You can Google foot in the door principle. You can listen to our commitment and consistency episode to find out a little bit more. But at the end of the day, this is especially helpful if you've got long sales cycles. So definitely give this a thought.
And on top of that, you're going to have like metrics that are specific for each step in your funnel, which is basically what salespeople really like to do. They like to see like conversion from, initial contact to the next step you're taking them. That's X% and so on at each of the step, instead of having just one big conversion from initial contact to, booking appointment kind of thing. And so that way you can optimize each of those steps separately. That doesn't mean that because one of your campaign is not performing well, that your entire campaigns are performing badly. Mm-hmm. It could be that only from pricing request to booking appointment is not going very well. That way you may actually spend more effort into that particular objection or concern campaign. And off you go. You can effectively like split a bit more and then do a bit more analysis on the reply you're getting.
Yeah, just an easier way to optimize the campaigns you've already got going on.
Absolutely.
A bit of a disclaimer. There is a downside to this if you choose to break your campaign up too much. Asking your prospects to jump through too many hoops may prove to be less effective than a more direct approach. So play with the number of steps in your campaign in order to figure out the best way your sales funnel should be set up.
That's right. Don't forget to test, please enter your credit card number and here's the button to buy.
And while you're testing, keep in mind that better response rate isn't necessarily going to indicate what works better than the other campaign. Look for deals closed or whatever your end metric is in order to figure out if this is working. I like to look, instead of deals closed, sort of revenue generated. That's kind of the most honest metric that I know for my particular business, but you've got your own metric that's way more important than response rate, and make sure to look at it.
That's it.
Great cast.
Great cast, Jack.
Okay, Jeremy. See ya.
See you next time.
Multi-part campaigns make it easier to move prospects to the next step in your sales funnel. Use them to 1, improve positive response rates using the foot in the door principle. 2, avoid wasting time with unqualified leads by asking filtering questions in your part 1. 3, quickly follow up with prospects with templates for different replies like referrals or requests for information. And finally, number 4, gain a clearer understanding of where your prospects are dropping off in your sales funnel. Just a word of caution. Though it may lift your response rates, make sure to use the right metric, such as deals closed or revenue generated, for your final metric when determining if multi-part campaigns are working for your business.
Hey, cold emailer.
Yeah, you.
If you got some value from this episode, give us a high vibe by sharing a 2-sentence review on iTunes.
Or Stitcher or TuneIn. That works too.
It's a quick way to help other growth-minded folks like us find this podcast.
so they can send awesome emails
and make everyone's inbox a better place. Thanks.